Any Rush fans here? Who knows? I was a big Rush fan back in the 80s. I remember Neil Peart in an interview saying, you know, if you go to a Rush fan, you look out in the audience, there's not a lot of women there. We didn't attract them. Just a bunch of dorky guitar guys staring at us. Hey, anyway, it's Brian up here in Kingfield, Maine. I got one to show this morning that I'm pretty psyched about. I picked this up, and I got a great deal on it from another guy that does restoration work, but he just didn't like working on Gibsons, I guess, for some reason. Sometimes they have a real stubborn neck to pull off. This one did not. But at any rate, this is an early 70s Norlin era Gibson SJ-Deluxe. The Norlin era has got, you know, a bad rap. I got a 71 Les Paul that is just awesome. I fixed up a J45 a while ago that sounded great when I was done, but Norlin Corporation bought Gibson in 1969, and the first thing they did was they overstructured all of the acoustic guitars because they didn't want to make any warranty claims. And so what they did is they did what was called the dreaded, they didn't call it that, but the double X bracing. So you got an X, and then you got a second X down on the belly. On top of that, they then added this huge bridge plate that took up all the space between the X's, and it was about a 1/4 inch thick plywood. And the whole idea behind this is this was going to keep the top completely solid, and they'd never have to do any warranty work, and there'd be no cracks. Well, on this one, that worked. There are no cracks on this top. This is a gorgeous spruce top that is now, 50 years old. Unfortunately, even with all that crazy bracing, the upper leg of one of the X's on this one had broken. And as a result of that and all the string tension and somebody not paying much attention to it, the top had really dipped. So it had a real hole right here around the sound hole. If you laid a straight edge across the top, it was more than an 1/8 inch. It was close to a 1/4. I'd call it 3/16. So that was rough. Needed a neck reset, of course, just because of all of this structural defects and the age of the guitar. So the action was crazy high. And then on top of that, it had a broken truss rod. You could not adjust it at all. The rod itself, the nut was frozen and the whole rod was spinning. So it was broken all the way down here where the anchor is. So on the bench it went, and I pulled the neck, I pulled the fretboard, I pulled the back. So all the binding and everything came off. The purfling stayed intact on the back, so that was good. More on that in a second. There is a flaw here I'll tell you about. The back came off, and I took all the bracing out. So everything came out of this thing. While the fretboard was off, I routed a channel down the center, and it now has a 2-way adjustable hex key accessed truss rod like a Martin, and it's through the sound hole. I didn't want to route out any more up top here because of the notorious Gibson neck break. Now the Norlins do have a bit of a volute, so it's a little bit thicker neck, but so this is just there for show, and I actually wrote on the inside of that truss rod cover, sound hole access 4mm. So you stick a 4mm wrench up in here just like a Martin, you adjust the truss rod that way. All right, back to the back. Back was off. Everything came out of the inside, including that great big, huge, humongous bridge plate, which I have a line around here somewhere, but I don't see it handy, so I'm not going to go digging while the video is recording. And I rebraced it. It has a standard normal X-brace pattern, just like any other, before Norlin and after Norlin Gibson, 1/4 inch thick Sitka spruce. I've got a hard rock maple bridge plate that's about the size of the bridge, so it's not a big, humongous thing. And that's 1/10 of an inch thick, the bridge plate itself. 2 tone bars down in the belly, finger braces on the side. Popsicle I left original, but I put a new transverse brace because I had to have a hole in it for the truss rod to go through. Before I did that, let me back up. Before I did that, I took this thing and I clamped it on top of my radius dish, which is concave to match the 28-foot radius of a top. And then I put my convex radius plate, which I use for sanding the bottom of the bridges, right on top of that, and I clamped it down. And that sat clamped for about a week. And every now and then I would take the thing off and I would sponge it out just lightly with some warm water just to get some moisture into that wood and then clamp it back down again. So before I rebraced it, this thing was back to being nice and flat. We didn't have the big dip in it. So new bracing, new truss rod. While the fretboard was off, the frets were worn down well beyond any more dressing was able, so it's completely refretted. These have the medium/higher gauge nickel frets from StewMac. Edges are nice and beveled, dressed, polished as well as I polish things. I'm not the greatest fret guy in the world, I'll be the first to admit that, but refretted. And then I put it all back together. Brand new bone saddle, original. Maybe it wasn't original, but it's a bone nut, and it was what was on here when I got it. It does have replacement tuners. This probably would have had Klusons on it, but this has, 70s or early 80s era Grover milk bottles. And the only thing really visible is some filled in tiny screw holes on the top where the Klusons would have been before. Flaws. Okay, it's a 50-year-old guitar. It's got, its share of little dings and scratches, etc. here and there. There is a finish crack over on this side of the lower bout, but it doesn't go all the way through, and I know that because I was deep into it and there was no crack on the inside. Let's see what I was talking about here with the purfling. When I straightened out that belly, it changed the sides, and even though I got them as 90 degree as I could from the base, when I put the back on it, there's a section here that when I put the binding back on, tiny little piece of the purfling is just kind of not visible anymore. The rest of it, you can see it has the white, black, white purfling all the way around, but over here, just in order to clean up that groove to get the binding back in, a bit of the purfling disappeared. So that is gone, and there's a flaw. Down the bottom by the heel block, some finish cracks from when I was removing the back. I'll just take credit for that. That was operator error. And the same thing up top. Now, these don't go all the way through. They really just got the finish itself, the nitro. And so, it's visible, but it's not structurally any sort of issue. The inside was all cleaned up. I got rid of all the old glue residual mess. I had to replace a few pieces of linings, curved linings on the inside. And then I always like to you can't really see it, so I don't know why I'm holding it that close, but I like to put a shellac coat all the way on the inside. It just kind of cleans it up, makes it look nice. But at any rate, this thing is a Canon. This is a 25.5-inch scale, square shoulder dreadnought. I didn't talk about specs because most people know them, but solid spruce top, solid mahogany back and side, solid mahogany neck, got an 1.11/16" nut, 2 1/8" string spacing at the bridge, and nice comfortable C-shaped neck. It's not a big monster like a lot of the old Gibsons, which I actually really like. This is just a real comfortable acoustic neck. Really loud. It's got some great volume. Going to see James tomorrow night in Bangor. Anyway, early 70s, 70 to 74, based on the serial number. Gibson SJ-Deluxe, completely reworked, restored, rebraced, and like my listing says here, back in the 40s, during World War II, there's a group called the Kalamazoo Gals. Gibson used all women to make their guitars, and the banner on top said, "Only a Gibson is good enough." In fact, let's see, I made a guitar and I said, "Only Deanna is good enough." That's my wife's name, but only a Gibson is good enough. Some might say that during the Norland years, they could have used those Kalamazoo gals. The bottom line is it's 50-year-old wood. It's a solid American-made guitar. I've got it priced here to reflect the flaws, my hobbyist luthier skills, and the fact that it's not all original anymore, but it sure is a nice player. Thanks a lot for watching.